A Guten Erev Shabbos. There's an old joke about two friends who were on a ship together and they wound up shipwrecked in a storm. They make their way to the proverbial desert island, and when they figure out that they're alone and they need to be rescued, one of them gets to work building a signal flare to light at the top of the tallest tree. He's spelling out SOS with logs on the beach, frantically trying to make their presence known to rescuers. The other friend is munching some berries, taking a walk on the beach, relaxing, building himself a hammock, probably building two shuls, but that's a different joke. So the frantic friend says to the relaxed friend, "How can you be so calm? Why aren't you helping me? Don't you want to make sure that the rescuers are able to find us?" And the calm friend says, "Don't worry. I made a pledge to Federation. They'll find me." It's one of the vintage jokes, and it speaks to how important fundraising became in the modern Jewish world and how persistent some organizations can be in pursuing their donors. Our portion this week speaks about the origins of fundraising in Torah. The first appeal in this week's Parshas Vayakhel, was a capital campaign to build the first shul, the Mishkan, the portable tabernacle that was our focal point in the desert for 40 years and when we came into Israel for 400 years, until the first temple was built in Yerushalayim. Mishkan, of course, is from the word shachen, to dwell, as in Shekhinah, God's presence that dwells among the Jewish people, even as we're in exile. The fundraising campaign for building the Mishkan fulfilled several purposes. In addition to building a place for us to center our worship around, it also atoned for the sin of the golden calf, which we read about last week. Some of our people, not all, but many, were very ready and willing to donate money for the wrong cause, to build an idol. However misguided and mistaken that effort was, donating toward building the Mishkan was a kapara, an atonement for that earlier lapse in judgment. In fact, the beginning of last week's parsha spoke about each family donating a half a silver shekel, somewhere around $7 or $8, not an impossible burden, but it says to make atonement for your souls, lechaper al nafshotechem. How can this be that through an act of tzedakah we can change the past and make right things we've done wrong? That's really at the level of godly understanding. We're not necessarily given to know how it works. We only need to know that it works, and that is a good thing. Above and beyond atonement, making good the past, it also ensured the future. Obvious, you say, because we were building something useful that would bring us together, and that's true and correct. And even more so, it brought us together as a people in the act of building, specifically the project of building something together. If you want to read a great book on this, have a look at Rabbi Sachs's book called The Home We Build Together, which talks about different communities in a mixed society, like, for example, in Great Britain, treating the society they live in as a home that everyone invests in building and benefits from, which is different than something like, say, a hotel where you pay to stay there for a short time and you don't really care what happens after you leave. So Parshas Vayakhel opens with the insight that building the Mishkan, as important as this portable shul is and will be, does not supersede Shabbat. All work on building pauses over Shabbos. This is our source for preserving the specialness of this day. Then we find something that catches our attention, which is that the portion is largely a restatement of all the instructions that were given just a few weeks ago in Parshas Truma. It's just that the verbs have changed from "you shall make" to "and they made." You would think, with so much important ground to cover in the Torah, it would have minimized the restatement of Truma and Tetzaveh, for that matter, which will get a similar treatment next week, with just a few sentences, summary, something like, "and they completed everything they were commanded," something like that. So we have to infer that there is something special and worthwhile to be gleaned from a step-by-step review. Perhaps we can say that there are two dimensions to building, as we've already suggested, a practical level of building the structure, and then there's the spiritual, emotional accomplishment of pitching in, participating, working on something together. Perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, with a deep connection to our people and a sharp sense of what lies within us, sensed this and saw fit to review step by step what we had accomplished working together. Perhaps the very name of the portion, Vayakhel, which you could translate as he gathered together, suggests this. If you look closely at the title, you see the roots of a similar word, kihila, in Vayakhel. That's kihila, as in kihilat sharei Torah. Just like our kihila here, Vayakhel teaches us that every Jew is part of the collective reality of the people. Every Jew is necessary to us to fulfill our purpose as a nation. And since each of us is part of the effort, no one can say, whether of the highest spiritual standing a person might be or otherwise, that that person is not valued and important, even essential to our collective purpose. And that everyone's individual talents and gifts are truly realized only when we work together. Vayakhel, he gathered together. Warmth, sincerity, enthusiasm are gifts. These are offerings that we can all bring to everything we do. Parshas Vayakhel at several points emphasizes that women as well as men donated to the construction project. This is in contrast to the donations that were made to the ill-advised Golden Calf project earlier, to which women famously did not contribute. When we read at the outset of this week's portion, they came, both men and women, Nachmanides, the Ramban, understands that the women outshone the men here in their eagerness to participate. Women donated first and inspired, or maybe shamed, their husbands into taking part. Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer thinks that it's in the merit of this that women got an extra holiday, Rosh Chodesh, on which women traditionally rest and take a step back from work. One man among a thousand, on the comment in Koheles, Ecclesiastes, one man among 1,000 I have found, but a woman among all those I have not found. Rabbeinu Bachia says that King Solomon is saying here that while many men sinned in the moment of the golden calf, not one single woman was found participating in that idolatry. By contrast, women had a huge share in contributing to building the Mishkan, where God's presence would dwell among the people. The Gemara, the Talmud, Tractate Nida, page 45b, says that God created women with a greater level of understanding, bina, than men. Nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bina yisera be'isha, yoser mi be'ish, it says. This statement firstly suggests that the gender inequity prevalent among most ancient societies was not the case with our people, and accordingly gives some insight into how we survived the Maisa of the golden calf. Even more, it supports what we say from the last chapter of Proverbs on Friday night, Eishes Chayil Miyimtza, a woman of valor, who can find? And even more, something from earlier in Proverbs, chapter 14, the often quoted maxim, Chachmat Nashim Banta Beita, the wisdom of women builds the house. Here we're referring to, on the face of it, to the mainstay of Jewish life, the Jewish home, where anyone who knows anything knows who exactly is in charge. In a larger sense, maybe we're talking about building this home where Hashem dwells and rests and where we all come together. There's actually a fascinating subsection of Jewish ritual art that involves some of these same things, women's contributions to building the sanctuary. Here, of course, we're talking about post-temple contributions, namely handcrafted decorative arts like the parochas, the ark, and Torah covers that have graced and continue to grace synagogues around the world. Go to any Jewish museum on any continent and you'll find examples, striking examples of handmade decorations for the shul, often made by the women of the Kehillah. There's a parochas, an ark curtain from Mainz in Germany, dated from 1793. And the inscription, the dedication, notes that the material for the curtain was donated by a certain Madame Charlotte, wife of Rabbi Yitzhak Naftali, a very pious woman, apparently who instructed that one of her garments be donated to the shul after her passing and made into a parochas, a curtain for the ark. Apparently, this was not a unique event because some of the halachic literature of the time, in particular the writings of the Bach, Rabbi Yoel Sirkis in Poland, questions the propriety of such a practice. Others were less hesitant. For example, a Hungarian rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Leib of Sherdaheli, allowed a certain woman to fulfill a vow that she had taken. to donate an expensive silk garment to the shul and have it made into a parochet, an ark curtain. Rabbi Yair Bachrach, the Chavois Yair of Mainz, and later on Koblenz in Germany, wrote an apparently fairly authoritative tshuva based on this week's parsha and the donations of the women of Israel specifically that permitted these kind of donations, with the provision that the cloth from the garments no longer be recognizable as to their origins. Another no less fascinating institution was that of the wimpel, the Torah wrapping cloth that's used in the German Jewish world. Based on a practice from the times of the Mishnah, when a groom would make a donation of a mappa, or a Torah wrapping cloth, to the shul on occasion of his ofruf, the Shabbos aliyah before the chuppah, the Jews of Germany adapted this practice and modified it just a little bit. They would take the swaddling cloth that was used at a baby's bris and afterward clean it, cut it into long strips that were sewn together into a very long binding cloth, and then the mother or the grandmother of the boy would decorate it with paint or needlework or some other artistic embellishment, often with the boy's name on it, birthday. Then when the boy was 3 or so, the father would be called up for Galila to wrap and dress the Torah after it was read, and he would bring up the little boy to help in this dedicating this decorated piece of synagogue art that was being donated. All this was meant to instill love of Torah and being in the shul from a very young age. When they would decorate the wimpel, the mother or grandmother would design Jewish symbols like a chuppah or a sefer Torah, a lion, a crown, a deer, if the boy's name was Herschel, and so on. They would put the date of the birth and the beracha of Hashem yigadluhu l'Torah l'chuppah l'masim tovim, that be'ezer Hashem the boy would grow up to Torah and chuppah and good deeds. These wimples would be stored in the shul or even in the aron and the ark itself, and would be used to wrap the Torah for the bar mitzvah and the ofruf. And of course, as the historians note, this was always an occasion for a kiddush sponsorship. Some things never change. Some of the commentaries suggest that in the Mishkan, as well as up to our times, it's an outstanding quality of Jewish women to give as the spirit or heart moves them. They argue that Jewish women always excelled in this kind of offering, participation where there is no set amount or criteria or obligation, but rather coming from a deeper place of inner feeling and self-motivated action. Contrast that to the obligations from which women are exempt, like those few that have a specific time or a measure. Again, these contributions are coming from a place of responsibility and initiative, seeing the place of this kind of participation in the building and life of our people, which is what keeps us here and keeps us going. The opening words of our portion, Vayakhel, speak to the collective effort, even with the importance of each individual, in the movement forward of the entire Am Yisrael, and inspires us. And now, as springtime seems to arrive and the season of freedom approaches, that we soon celebrate the freedom of each and every Jew, whatever it is that holds them captive or wherever their exile may be. And together, very soon, we'll sit down together at the Seder table of freedom just a few weeks from now. Shabbat Shalom.